The reason I'm here is to tell you a true story that happened a long time ago. I'm talking about the people who've experienced genocide, a planned extermination of a people or race by a government. My mother was one of those survivors. She was an amazing woman and, like many others, has passed away. Her name is Kazimirski. My mother survived the Holocaust, the worst genocide that has taken place in the history of mankind. If something happened a long time ago, should we still care about it? Should we just forget about bad things that happen and stay quiet? I say no. Because it's a story of genocide, and genocide still occurs in various parts of the world, such as Syria and Iraq. It all starts with fear, hate, and ignorance. Soon you will hear, in her own words, how her family and friends were murdered, her once vibrant community destroyed, and the end of the world as she knew it.
A man, his name was Leon, and he was working for my father for many, many years in the coal business. He came one morning with a rifle and he said, I joined now the militia and I have an order to take you to work. And we already heard the word work meant that you never come back. My brother Benny, who was 18 years old at the time, he heard a commotion. He woke up and he said, Daddy, I want to go with you. My father motioned to him, Benny, go back to bed. He says, no, I'm going with you. And so they were both followed by Leon, taken through the gate. Outside, we found out that they were all shot. They were all murdered. Ditches were already prepared in the prison, one layer after another, one on top of another. Until the rest of my life, I'm always thinking, did Benny see, was he the first victim to see my father being shot? Or did my father see his son being shot first? But of course, that mystery I will never find out.
2/3 of Europe's Jews, 6 million women and children and men were murdered during the Holocaust. The Nazis claimed that every person of the Jewish race had to be exterminated like rats. The Nazis didn't just murder individuals. They also destroyed the unique and vibrant communities throughout the continent, some of which dated back to the Middle Ages and even earlier.
Soon I heard screaming, such terrible screaming, I didn't know where it's coming from. I opened a little bit the curtain and I saw my next door neighbor, Sarah, my best friend, and she was being dragged by Nazi soldiers. There must have been 6 or 7 to the backyard. And I said, my God, what are they going to do to her? Her parents were kept back as not to see what will soon happen to Sarah. The first one unzipped his pants and held her mouth shut and raped her. The next ones were standing and waiting to do the same thing to her. Sarah was screaming a little bit, but she couldn't scream. The parents were held back. We didn't hear Sarah cry anymore. They all left. Her parents ran out And they carried Sarah, and her long hair was hanging down. Next day they buried Sarah. No special funeral. And I just couldn't get over it.
I've heard this story many, many times. And I keep thinking, well, maybe it's going to get easier every time I hear it. It doesn't. It gets harder.
After 2 days, Machla, my friend, said to me, "Come to the window." And the way she looked at me, I knew that something terrible is happening. I heard a screaming, and I saw my mother. My mother with a few other people who were being led by soldiers with rifles. They got them out from a hiding. I don't know where she was hiding. And they screamed at her, "Obernutza, turn! Obernutza do syny!" I knew they were Ukrainians. Turn to the wall. My mother was begging and screaming, "Don't shoot us! Don't shoot us!" She didn't have a chance to finish the sentence. They were going ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Blood was gushing all over the place. The white snow was covered with blood. She was dead. Now I knew that she was dead.
The war ended in 1945, and my parents, after hiding amongst the Polish partisans who were fighting the Nazis and walking east towards the Russian front, ended up in a small town nearby that had been liberated by the Russians. My father opened up a small dental office, and my mother became pregnant with my eldest brother, Mark. But my mother then decided to go back to her village and discovered that she was a total outcast.
We tried to catch a train to go to Bavaria, and we had a little carriage with us for the child, but the Germans wouldn't let us on with the carriage, and I almost lost my baby. My husband was still not in the train, and they wouldn't let us in. And a German woman recognized that we are Jews, and she says, "Verfluchte Juden, even after the war was over, Berlin was in ashes and in fire. These are Jews, these are Jews. Get them out of the train, these are Jews." And the war was over, imagine. So another woman came over to her, and she hit her on the face. And she says, "Leave them alone. Let them stay here with the child." So I took my little boy and my husband, and I sat down in the corner near the toilet. And I sat there in the train on the floor and waited until the train would leave. And we arrived to Munich.
My parents spent many years living in Saint-Agath-des-Monts, which is a small town north of Montreal in the Laurentians. This is where my brothers, Mark, Seymour, and I grew up and encountered a great deal of anti-Semitism. It wasn't unusual to see signs posted that said, "Jews are not wanted here in Saint-Agath, so scram while the going is good." My brother worked summers at a local hotel that visibly displayed a sign that said, "No Jews, no dogs." And at that time, no one would sell a property to a Jewish person. So when my mother wanted to buy her first house in Saint-Agath, she put on a cross and pretended she was Catholic. Throughout her life, my mother never stopped honoring the memory of those who were murdered in the Holocaust. She did this by educating others about the need to take action, to stand up to bullying, racism, and discrimination. For the last 20 years, my mother went to schools and universities to speak to students, adults, and she even spoke to 2,500 American soldiers in Hawaii. She wrote a book about her experience called Witness to Horror. Up until her last breath, she told her story so that we would not forget, so that we would fight to stop it from happening again to anyone. Her life, her mission, and her spirit will be carried on because I am here to present it to you in the hope that you will not remain silent. We must accept people from other cultures, religions, and orientations. I hope what you've seen today will inspire you to help carry out my mother's mission, to stop the killing, suffering, sadness, and pain that continue to go all over the world today. As Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Thank you for listening.